Hello everyone, I'm Ben Johnson and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with chess players, personalities, authors, and adult improvers about their lives, their careers, and about chess improvement. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to Perpetual Chess. Before we get into today's episode, just a very brief announcement to let you all know that Perpetual Chess now has an Instagram page. I am not super active on Instagram. I have a personal account that I hardly ever check. But now we will have an official Perpetual Chess account that will not be run by me. But the good news is it will share audio clips. So if you enjoy Instagram, I'll link to it. I believe it's going to be at Perpetual Chess. Feel free to share the little clips. And I'll also be sharing some clips and someone will be helping me out with that, which is greatly appreciated. So I'll be sharing that on Twitter as well and maybe the Facebook group. So those are our primary social media reaches now. I'll, of course, link to those in the show description, but just a heads up to keep an eye out for that. With that out of the way, let's get to introducing today's guest. So a lot of you have, over the years, requested that we interview a tournament director so that we could get sort of a behind-the-scenes look at how these tournaments get run, answer some commonly asked questions and stuff like that. And we are going to have a great one today, one that comes highly recommended by a friend and former guest of the show, Christopher Chabris, among other people. I saw that Grandmaster Akshat Chandra, before he was a Grandmaster, wrote blog posts glowing about this guest. By day, he is an observatory scientist at the James Webb Space Telescope Science Institute, but he also is active running tournaments in the Maryland and Washington, D.C. area. He's the treasurer of the Maryland Chess Association. His tournaments are known to be very pleasant. We'll get into what's different about his tournaments in a minute, but first, let's bring him in. So, Michael Regan, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I'm excited to talk with you about sort of behind the scenes, tournament details, putting everything together, fair play, amenities. I even have a hygiene question for you. So we have a lot to talk about, but
Okay.
Not your hygiene. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
or mine for that matter. But I do. First, I figured it would be useful to know, because I know we have lots of listeners who are interested in tournament directing. Some do tournament directing. I've done a bit of tournament directing, but not a ton. But what was your entry into this world, Michael?
There's sort of two phases. Back in the late 70s, when I was in college, I directed 4 or 5 tournaments. I can't remember the motivation, but they were at hotels and everything. I just wanted to do a better job, and I thought I could do it. And that same motivation kicked in when my kids started playing chess, when I started back in the early 2000s, and saw how Maryland Chess was running the Scholastic events and thought I could do a better job, and then transitioned into running the Maryland Scholastic for a few years, and then thought I could do a better job in the Opens, which I thought were more challenging than the Scholastics, and have evolved from there.
And by all accounts, you are doing a good job. But what was it that first struck you? What were the first flashpoints for you in terms of things that you felt people should be doing better?
Starting on time, I'd say, is my number one thing. It was frustrating to show up, and at some of those events, the early Scholastic ones, you wait an hour and a half before round one would start. And just because poor organization. And that's been always is like my number one thing. If the round starts at 11, then the clock should be ticking at 11 is my goal. And that's my number one, because you're wasting people's time. You're going to stay up later. Nobody wants to be there. And there's a feedback that if you don't start on time, people don't show up on time.
Right.
And it's very frustrating to me. I've had my son and I playing in tournaments where he would be in a lower rated section, and the pairings don't even go up, until the scheduled start time of the round. And it was a 7:00 game, and he was youngish. So why, we're starting at 7:30. now, he's going to be even tireder as the game goes on. What is the point? Yeah. And I can go on and on about this, but
yeah. Well, why don't we start by asking what your tips are? Because again, I've run a few tournaments. I try to run them on time, but occasionally I would be 10 or 15 minutes late. So what do you do to make sure that there's zero exceptions to the problem of people running in at the last minute trying to register, or some sort of issue with SwissSys or whatever pairing program you're using? How do you make sure that there's no delays?
Well, one is you have to be willing to tell people who show up late that they're getting a bye in the first round because I've already done the pairings. And you annoy that person, but the majority of the people showed up on time, registered ahead of time, and those are the ones you need to focus on. You can't let the exception affect the whole crowd. And that willingness, wanting to get the last at the door entry in, is what Maryland Chess used to do too, that led to so many problems. And it, creates a bad reputation if people know you don't start on time. And so, it's frustrating to me. When someone shows up 5 minutes before the round saying, "Can I register?" I have to just say no. You can get a bye in round one, and I'll put you in round two. And the vast majority of them accept that. And then they evolve to showing up on time.
Yeah. You're training them properly. And what is your cutoff for what time they have to get there before the first round?
Officially, it's an hour, but I will go. I actually do the pairings at about 30 minutes till, we use texting to send them out. And if I've made a mistake, if I've missed someone's registration or something, I will repair. But if it's their mistake, then I won't do I won't.
Okay, and just to share a few more of things that Michael tries to do in his tournaments, I'm reading bullet points from your upcoming tournament, which are: the top 2 sections are FIDE rated, the top 5 boards are on DGT. Board sets and clocks are provided for virtually all sections, and they are often wood sets and boards, not plastic or vinyl. All clocks are DGT and properly set, so no confusion about whether the clock is right. 30-second increments. Christopher Chabris mentioned he's a particular fan of that. He's developed an aversion, he said, because of this, to playing non-increment events. Rounds start on time. They actually do. Verified. Tentative pairings appear online, and you get text tentatively at least 45 minutes before the round so you can do some prep. So lots of great things that I think should be emulated, although I'm not sure. Like, there may be some people who feel like they're just trying to start out and that they can't emulate them. So which of these do you think are the most important to provide as a baseline, Michael?
I think planning to start on time. And there's a difference in scale, between a 30-player tournament, a 300-player tournament, where processes people use in the smaller events break down when you get to a big event. And that's where a lot of people run into problems. I've had a couple of tournaments blow up, scholastic ones, where there were just too many people, and it's one of the reasons why I developed the texting method code came up with, because if you got a 30-player event and you print out the pairings and you put them up and people walk up, look up the pairings and go to their board, but when you got 500, which we had in Maryland at a time, just even letting people know that the pairings is up is challenging. And then you have this a number of people all going up to find the pairings and trying to find their boards, and it was taking us 45 minutes from when we paired to when we could actually start the next round, 30 to 45. And it was a very frustrating process. And by being able to directly send each person, go to board 45, you're playing white, it's much more efficient in crowd management. It's not as critical in an open event, but it still helps by people getting the event. They don't have to stop at the pairing sheet. They come from wherever they are. Getting the text, they go straight to the board.
And how do you streamline the texting itself? Even the logistics of texting 150 or 300 different people seems like a challenge to me.
Oh, well, I have a program that I wrote that basically reads the SwiftSys files, creates the message, and sends it out.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And it does 10 texts a second. So you just hit a button, and within 10 seconds or so, everybody's got their text and or email of what, where to go and who they're playing. And that evolved from the Scholastic, from that problem I was talking about of just trying to get the info to the people was so hard. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I might as well use it in the open events. It's not critical for getting the round to start, but it does, again, just make it much less hectic of no scramble to people standing in front of the pairing sheet writing down their opponent's name, and no one can see onto their score sheet, and no one behind them can even figure out who they're playing, and it just adds time and hassle.
Yeah, certainly. It's I'm sure it's appreciated by the players. If they're staying in the hotel, they can stay where they are. And at least for your next tournament, I saw the hotel rates are pretty reasonable, $89 a night. Is that something that you try to arrange as well?
Well, it's a goal. It helps. Hotels in the winter really appreciate us. It's not, a prime time. But if you're on the weekend, hotels in general have empty rooms. It's when you move into the longer events and you take up a weekday that you have a problem because you're competing with the business customers.
And generally, most of the tournaments that I did run when I was doing tournament directing were smaller scale Scholastic events back when I lived in Pittsburgh. So I didn't ever reach a scale where I needed a hotel. When you rent space for a hotel, how much of it is paying for conference rooms as opposed to them relying on the income they're going to generate from the people staying at the hotel?
It's a mix. If you can guarantee enough rooms, and that is the unknown what that number is, you can get the meeting rooms for free. I've had that a couple of times. Right. And if they're slow enough and they really want your business, no matter what, if you guarantee some amount of rooms, you're going to be paying less for the meeting rooms than if you just come in there and want to have a room for a day for their meeting rooms. So getting enough people in to stay at the hotel is the critical part of making it cost effective. And that's where the sort of medium-sized tournaments really struggle, because they can't fit, they're too big to fit in a Elks Lodge type room. They need a bigger space. But if everybody's commuting and, just driving from home, drive and sleep in their own beds, they're not going to sell many hotel nights. And so you're still going to be paying, list price for the meeting rooms. So that 50 to 100 range is a real challenge for tournaments. While something like the World Open, he's got like 1,000 people, almost all of them staying, and for 4 or 5 nights, I'm pretty sure the hotel rooms are free, and he's actually making money off commissions on the sleeping rooms.
Oh, the conference rooms are free, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That many room nights, you're going to get the conference rooms for free, the playing rooms.
That's interesting. And when you started out and you looked to dive into this world, what surprised you? Were there any unexpected difficulties in running your first handful of tournaments? I would say dealing with hotels is the biggest challenge. The hotel salespeople, because we're small events, we're getting the new sales always. It's always the new people. And it should be, if those rooms, let's say the meeting rooms are going to be empty because it's a weekend, and the sleeping rooms are going to be empty because it's a weekend, it should be that they should be really looking for your business, that anything is better than nothing. But the variance in price, it's a very inefficient market. You can go out with the same request for proposals to 5 hotels, basically at the same quality level,
and get numbers by a factor of 10 different on what they'll want to charge you. And I just because they look at what's the best possible. For them, the best possible is a wedding reception.
Right.
And so if they can get a wedding reception and sell 10,000 of food and beverage, they're very happy with that. Weddings don't, in general, sell as many sleeping rooms, but they don't care if they can get that much food and beverage. So some of our hotels, like one of our main ones, we never have the main ballroom. We're always in a series of medium to smaller size rooms that we spread out in. And the fact that we will use that on a weekend and it's not competing for weddings or proms or bar mitzvahs, which are all things that people bring in a lot of money, not as much food and beverage at a prom, but the others, is a good relationship for them because those rooms sit empty on the weekends.
Yeah.
So finding the right hotels is critical. And so you just have to.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the stuff you describe strikes me as fairly seasonal as well. Like your upcoming Baltimore Open is February 7th to 9th. I mean, definitely no proms.
Right.
Probably not a ton of weddings either. So does that help with the deals you're able to make?
Yeah, we always do better. And that's why we kind of bias towards the winter. But the Maryland Open, we're in mid-April. We're usually in early May. So our room nights are usually more expensive. And we got bumped by a couple of weeks just because of from our normal this year competing for space. That springtime in the DC area is big, both because of weddings and proms and just more tourists, and that can be challenging. But even when you get back into August is a slow month at hotels too, but July isn't. So, and it all depends on your local market. But in most places, except say Florida, the wintertime is going to be a slower time of year.
And is your goal with these tournaments, are you trying to make money or are you just trying to break even? What's your general goal for these?
We're trying to make a small amount of profit. That's how profit's the wrong word for a nonprofit. It's positive cash flow.
Right.
That's how we've been able to buy the material, the board sets and clocks. But most of that goes into both scholastic stipends. We give free entries to players who win some of our scholastic tournaments into our open events. And then the Washington International, which is a net negative tournament for us, but kind of our main thing we subsidize significantly to get a 9-round norm event and being able to give some conditions to foreign GMs and IMs.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite commendable that you do that. I mean, it's, at the non-elite level, support for titled players and people seeking titles can be hard to come by.
Yeah, it's hard, because it's easy in Europe to get non-home federation players, but it's challenging in a large country.
Yeah.
Like us. So Canadians are our friends, and Mexico. Those are two big components we get, but we get a lot of people coming. Since it's in the summer, we get people from Europe coming over and playing too.
And what governs your decisions, like having 30-second increments in your tournaments and stuff like that? I mean, there's beyond just the timing of the making sure things start on time. There are other things that differentiate your tournaments, such as that.
Well, I like it. I mean, as a tournament director, there's two hats to wear. As an organizer, increments kind of scary because you never know how long the round is going to last.
Right.
And we do get a 120 move game every so often, which pushes up to the start time in the next round. But as a director, you like it because you have to have a valid score sheet at all times so that if there's any question, I don't come up to the board with missing moves. So I don't have to sit there if someone wants to claim repetition where I'm supposed to sit and watch, and try to figure out in my head if they're actually repeating positions. It's still a standard rules. There's no official time pressure. Nothing changes in the rules. And you don't have, the clock smashing, knocking over pieces stuff
Right.
that you get in delay, or where people are just going as fast as they can. And so when the people are playing on the increment, it's still quite stressful for them. Making a move every 30 seconds is hard, but it's like slow motion time pressure, because they have the adrenaline pumping, but they don't have to be slamming pieces all the time.
Yeah.
So it just leads to quality. It lets people, by having a second time control where you add some time in, and with 30-second increment, you can win some hard end games that there's no way you would ever be able to figure out anything over the board with 5-second delay. Rook versus knight versus rook. Knight and rook against rook. Those kinds of things. If you remember what the basic process is, either to attack or defend, I've seen people finally win. I've seen people, get into the 40s on that and then break down on defending and miss it at the end. But the game would have been over due to time pressure if they've been playing on delay.
So did you come to these time controls through trial and error? Did you used to do delay, or have you all done increment from the beginning?
No, we were delay. So I started doing the open events in 2008 or so, and we were delay for a while, for 3 or 4 years. So I'd have to go back and look, but it just seemed so logical to me. And having been a person who appreciates having time to think, and I thought it would make sense. And in general, people like it. There are people who don't like it. Some not. It takes a while to adjust that you can't allocate your time just by looking at the time on the clock and saying I have 15 more moves and there's only 5 minutes on my clock. People get confused when they're trying to do the simple math and realize that you always got the extra 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So it does take people a tournament. The first time it's sometimes awkward, but I would say 90% of people prefer the increment.
Yeah, and it looks like generally, I'm looking at the Baltimore Open, the time control is after the first round, it's 40 moves in 90 minutes and sudden death 30. Including 30-second increment. Is that your standard?
Yeah.
So how long? I mean, obviously I could figure this out, but that means you're accounting for about a 5-hour game. Is that?
The rounds are 7 hours apart. 5 hours would be a 60-move game, I believe.
Okay. So maybe on median, or maybe even median's probably below that, but
yeah.
But it's not
the interesting
unusual.
thing is, no matter what, the first time getting to 40 moves, 75% of the games will be over before you hit 40.
Mm-hmm.
Even more than that. If you look at time control, what happens when everybody's forced to be at 40 moves? It's like probably in the 80 to 90% of the games are over.
Okay.
But that tail, it'll be I'd say 5:15 to 5:30 is the normal last game finishing. And I am switching starting in April to 6.5 hours between rounds instead of 7, just because I've always been worried about the tail long running game, and a 6.5 hour game's not going to happen. So putting it 6.5, even someone with a 6 hour game would still have a half hour to recover, and most of the other people won't have to wait around as long.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although, speaking of the waiting around, I mean, I've interviewed a lot of top chess players, and I'm friends with Greg Shahade, so he's been on the show a bunch of times. And I don't know if you're familiar with his views about weekend tournaments, but he's always kind of outspoken about longer games. And recently, when I interviewed him, he was just saying that there needs to be some sort of accommodation for people to be able to eat meals comfortably and maybe even exercise while they're at a tournament. How do you balance views like that with the need for people to want to play their best and take their time when they play?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I have read his stuff, which is some of the reason why I was leaving that, that philosophy, which to me is you'd want 2 to 3 hours between your games.
Yeah.
To to be able to recover and do something. You've got this, as with everything, there's a pushback, and it usually relates to, parents who aren't the actual people playing, and kids who don't need the recovery as much, who don't want to be sitting around waiting. The people with the hotel rooms who are staying at the hotel, it's a very good experience to have the 2 to 3 hours to spare. You go back to your room, you relax. But people who are sitting in the Skittles room and don't really have anything to do,
right?
The extra time is not as good for them. So, and that's comments like Greg's are why, like at the Washington International, where it's 9 rounds, the second time control is 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes. As a compromise, you're going to play 9 games over 5 days. You need to be able to get to bed earlier and have more gap, more, you don't need as much time playing. I'm not a fan of going to a full 90 plus 30, or as fast as that, which I think Greg would prefer. Just because I like there to be time that you're not playing on increment after you've used up your primary forever. You can, at 40 moves, you can go to the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
And recover and come up with a plan for your end game.
Yeah.
But I also don't believe in adding an hour after move 40 would really add, can lead to really long games and draining people out, and doing that over 5 days. Day 5's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
You need some less time on the sitting down playing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what you mentioned about parents complaining is a really good point that I hadn't really thought of. I mean, of course, even though you're accounting for hotels and allowing people to travel to your tournaments, I mean, a lot of your clientele is going to be regional. And of course, chess being so popular at the scholastic level, it's going to be a lot of kids. So how do you balance more generally sort of the competing desires of scholastic players as compared to adult players?
Well, you'll see in one of the things I do differently in our tournaments, the bottom 2 sections, which for the Baltimore Open, the under 1250 and the under 1000, they're playing game 90, first 2 rounds. And so they're playing a lot faster. And they have their last game on Saturday, starts at 3 and actually finishes before even the evening game starts for the top sections, because it'll finish right at 6 when the other people are starting. It's a compromise, it's longer than your standard scholastic game 30, maybe game 60 game, but not as long as a full higher rated players, because they aren't using the time. But 90 is a lot for a lot of them anyway. And by pushing that in, you cut down on their waiting time, and you don't have as many kids running around in the evenings. And a lot of times it's not even the kids themselves, but it's the siblings of the kids.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
The younger siblings who are stuck at a hotel for all day by being letting them get home earlier.
Yeah. Do you think you could make it even, like if you were to push it to 60 minutes with increment, would you get a lot of complaints, do you think?
Well, the bottom 2 sections are not increment even.
Okay.
They're delay 5. So that also lets me have the rounds more predictable, so I can squeeze a little tighter in there.
Yeah.
And they have, let's see, at the Chesapeake Open, which is normally a 4 3-day tournament, the bottom sections had a 2-day where they just played Sunday and Monday, and they had the first 4 rounds were game 25, and still probably half of the players in each of those sections played that 2-day schedule to play really fast for 4 rounds. I'm uncomfortable, but that's what they. Yeah.
Well, the parents. I mean, it's a lot for the parents,
Right.
So I mean, you would know as a parent. So is your son out of the house or still home? Does he still play chess?
He's not playing. He's in college right now.
Okay.
My daughter played too, so it was fun.
Well, it's great that you're still supporting chess, even with your kids no longer actively involved at the moment.
yeah, it's no longer about them. It's just trying to do different things. I'm always.
That's great. So, Michael, we have a question from a supporter of the podcast, but first we're going to just take a break for 1 minute. Well, if you're a regular Perpetual Chess listener, you have probably heard that 100 Endgames You Must Know is a great book for basic endgame learning and review. What you may not have heard is that renowned YouTube presenter I Am John Bartholomew has just released a 19-hour video course with Chessable explaining 100 Endgames You Must Know. For a limited time, it's on sale, and it will even feature a bonus video of Magnus Carlsen trying out some of the exercises. This is a great value for the quality of instruction you're receiving, so go to chessable.com and grab it while it's on sale. Back to the show. Okay, so we have a question from Brian Castro of Better Chess Training. Brian is a supporter of the podcast and mentions that he is just getting into running tournaments. So here is Brian's question. He says, I'm a new club TD, and we have a situation at our small club where there's a divide between several stronger players and many less experienced players. We're not at the point in numbers where we can run 2 sections. What advice do you have for a tournament format and perhaps prizes to try to please everyone? I know you can't please everyone, but I want to try in this case.
Well, under prizes are the default way under some rating value. And if the strong players really want to play more strong players and not want to waste, quote, around, say, against someone 400 points below them, you could use accelerated pairings in the first 2 rounds, which will play the top half against the top half and prevent the big rating mismatches, and they'll get more quality games that way. Undersections are tricky because at some level you have to have more prizes because now you've got 2 sections to deal with. But in general, they always lead to more people playing is the thing to remember, that more people would rather be in an under 1800 section and have a chance to get first there than win an under 1800 prize in an open event.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to say without knowing the exact particulars of the situation where Brian is. Like, I mean, of course, quads are a possibility, but I'm sure Brian has thought of that and has his reasons for using a different format. But yeah, accelerated pairings. I mean, would they work even if you just have, say, 14 people total or something? Is that too small a field to use them?
So the normal method, is to prevent the perfect scores when you have a big group of people. Is if there's a large rating range, and then in that the top half is significantly rated higher than the bottom half, then they would work. Because the question is the second quartile going to beat the third quartile? So the top half losers, are they going to be able to beat the bottom half winners? And we've used it in some of our scholastic events when we have in our top section a big rating range, just to get more competitive games for those top players. Okay. And you prevent the mismatches.
So sounds like that might be worth trying. Okay. Another topic, of course, I can't have a tournament director on these days, Michael, unfortunately, without discussing the issue of fair play.
Okay.
So, what sort of precautions do you take? How often do you get complaints? I'm just curious, like how much of your tournament director bandwidth goes to this issue?
I've been okay. I talk about what do I do about it. So we have a rule, this kind of standard FIDE rules: no clock, no phones in your possession, and US Chess, you can have it, but you can't leave the room with it. I've got a wand metal detector that I will randomly hit people when they walk out of the room, just to let them know that I'm checking. I've got Wi-Fi cameras that I set up, especially for the Washington International, that record everybody's on view all the time, and I can go back to it if I need to, which so far I haven't had to. I think I'm trying to remember. I haven't had any. I really would like to punish someone, but I haven't caught anybody, and am frustrated with the stories that I have of people coming to me saying so-and-so was found with a phone in the bathroom at the last tournament, and so I don't want to play him. And as an organizer and a director, I can't do anything. That player, if they are not suspended from US Chess, I have to let them play. And that's a very frustrating thing for me. I can watch them like a hawk, which I have done, but when the player says, I don't want to play him, I actually one time did repair to avoid that situation. It's very frustrating to me of directors who don't follow through and with the, prosecution through an ethics complaint, because that to me is, if all you do is lose one game for cheating, the risk-reward ratio's in your favor.
Yeah.
And it needs to be strong consequences, because we're never going to catch everybody. So we need to really punish hard. And some TDs do not want to deal with the hassle. And I'm willing to.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such a tricky issue. And obviously we have baseball teams cheating. Everyone cheats at everything. But yeah, and it seems like an existential threat to the chess world. So I think bright lines would be helpful, and, firm rules. But it's easier said than done. If someone's going to try to hide a phone in the bathroom, that's tough to combat.
Yeah, but I have my desk, my TD desk, in the middle of the playing area. I'm not in the back room during the tournament, and I'm watching subliminally or actively. If somebody's getting up a lot, that if you're going to use the phone, if you're going to use it more than once, you're going to somehow, you need a way to look at it. And so that requires anonymity. It requires the ability to get up every couple of moves and go someplace. And by keeping an eye on the playing area, you would see those patterns. Okay. And I have wanded people who I've seen going out, at above average number of times.
That's good. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm sure some people feel like it's an invasion of privacy, but you can't have it both ways. If you want fair games, you have to be willing to accept some inconvenience.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable. Just like, I'm not accusing you of cheating. I'm just
right.
I don't have any evidence here, but and I'm frustrated that, just as an aside, that players can't have a tournament of their lifetime without it being thought that they cheated. And, people used to play statistically impossibly well for 5 games 20 years ago, and no one thought they were cheating. And now it's just assumed, well, they can't have possibly played that well. They must have cheated. And that's the only evidence some people think they need to, accuse someone of cheating. It's just they played really well. And you really need to find the method. You can't just play too well.
Yeah. It is unfortunate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the engines are only getting better, unfortunately, and
right.
The computers are only getting smaller. So it's,
exactly. So you can do more.
Yeah. And
less processing time.
Yeah. So one more on running tournaments, Michael. A supporter of the podcast, Rob Steele, I asked Greg Shahade a similar question just because it came up last time he was on the show. But he's had some issues with, as I mentioned, the hygiene of other players. So Rob mentioned, he says, I feel like local chess authorities could at least add in their handbooks a directive that people should exercise a minimum of courtesy when they're suffering from an illness. Germs can be spread very easily, either airborne, sneezing, coughing, or by touch, handshakes, or via the pieces. Some germs can survive for 72 hours, and it only takes a small bottle of sanitizer or disposable tissue to minimize the risk of transfer. I understand that this can't be made into an enforceable rule and that games cannot be forfeited, but the least that should happen is that clubs and authorities should make the environment a safer and cleaner place. So I guess that's not really a question, but I mean, Rob, I think if memory serves, he's hyper sensitive to germs and can get sick easily. Do you see any recourse for situations like this?
I know that. Well, I have a couple. One, under standard U.S. chess rules, I need someone to complain. Mm-hmm. Now, I push that and will at times intervene even when no one has complained. And I feel like I'm more sensitive than the average player when I hear someone coughing all the time or sniffling, and wish someone would complain so that I could, could intervene. I don't know that I've actually told someone, could you do something about it? It's really tricky because U.S. chess has these rules that are basically set up that the players have the right to play. And so it's hard for me to say you're too sick to play, which I have felt I should have said at times. I can separate people out. I can put them in a different room, but then their opponent's still going to be, their opponent has to be there. And there's people I have done who've been loud uncontrollably, and I've had them in separate rooms. But yeah.
But you can't just, if someone shows up at the board, you can't send them away.
Right.
Whether they're coughing or not. Yeah.
Now, there is a rule that you can't distract or annoy your opponent. And that's a case where if someone was actually, coughing all the time and the opponent came to me, I could come up with something that if it was enough of an annoyance, we would figure out something to do, whether that's moving to a different room or something. But again, unlike with the FIDE rules, under U.S. chess rules, we're real pushing that you can't intervene without a claim. But I can do a lot more when people complain.
Okay. Well, sorry, Rob, if that's not the best answer, but yeah, it's as Rob knows, it's a constrained environment in terms of what people can do. It's just, I'm sure it's frustrating for him. So Michael, before we let you go, thanks. This has been really, really helpful, I think. I mean, it's been a lot of, we talked to so many chess players of all levels and backgrounds, but we very rarely get the tournament director's perspective. But I did want to hear just a little bit about your own playing. I think I found on your USCF account, you have played, you are a tournament player as well. What, do you have, it looks like you haven't played in a while. Has directing replaced your urge to play for the time being?
It's replaced my time.
Right. Yeah.
I enjoyed playing. I've been playing going with the kids to tournaments and playing. And if they're not playing, just for me, I don't have a lot of interest in just going when playing by myself when everybody else is at home.
Yeah.
It's more fun. Even in high school, I had the best time playing on a high school team, where other people are rooting for you. You come back and everybody's happy when you win versus, playing individually. I do want to play more, but I just don't have the time. And like every weekends and stuff that I could do it, I've got so many chess tournaments I'm organizing that I don't.
Yeah. And you mentioned your son is now in college. Is your daughter still at home or is she in college?
No, she's in college also. Yeah.
Okay. So in theory, you probably have a little bit more time, but
yes.
But at least that's what I hear. My kids are far from college, but yeah, that's when I tell myself I might get back into playing is once they're, or again, if my son or my daughter take an interest in chess, that would enable me to play, but otherwise it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't play for 30 years and came back when they were interested, and we played and started playing for 5 or 6 years there, which was fun. And I was better. My rating is higher than it was when I was in my 20s, so I'm happy with that.
That's good. Yeah, you're rated about 1,800, is that right?
Yeah, 17 something.
Okay. Cool. Well, last thing, Michael, before we let you go. So if you were to try, I mean, we've kind of hit upon it already, but if you were to try to sort of bullet point things that you think can be done better for tournaments, what would they be?
Well, plan on starting on time. I think if you provide even plastic boards and pieces, it helps the organization so much, because even if the players bring clocks, you can get things started quicker. That's another advantage of having that equipment there. People can just show up and go, and you don't have to dump out the pieces and roll out the board. So, and that, while it's a cost, if you buy in bulk, you can do $4 to $5 for pieces and board. And that's...
Yeah, and it's like a one-time cost for the most part.
It's a one-time cost, right? And and you get, in general, appreciation from the players for doing that. It makes their life easier, but even as an organizer, it helps you start on time.
Yeah.
And again, starting on time causes the players to show up on time. So it's a feedback that I think everyone should try to do as much as possible.
And then we should mention in your tournaments, you're going the extra mile and providing breakfast on the last day. That's certainly a nice touch. I saw a picture, I think it was on Twitter. The food looked pretty good. Yeah,
well, that's, again, hotels you can pay more for the meeting rooms, or I can pay less for the meeting rooms and put some of the money into food and beverage. It's part of the package I negotiate with the hotel. Mm-hmm. So, and therefore the players get something out of it rather than me. That's
just a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they definitely notice and appreciate it. One last question that occurs to me. I mean, you mentioned that generally you're trying to at least break even and maybe make a little bit of money for the association. Does the fact that you personally aren't so driven by the profit motive, does that make your quote unquote business model less sort of replicable for anyone who's listening? I mean, it seems like a lot to ask for people to donate as much time as it sounds like you do.
I don't think so. But given that most tournaments lose money anyway, it's a study I think US Chess did. Even the ones that make solid profits are the very large ones, because again, like I said, there's this overhead cost that the small to medium tournaments suffer from. We do return a higher percentage than some of the bigger tournaments, and I think players appreciate that. But if you're only returning 40% of the entry fees, if that's the problem. Even if all that money's going into overhead, that's players kind of feel that. Yeah, I don't know. I wish prize money wasn't as big of a issue,
right?
But it's the environment we live in, and the expectation. But if people would come, and as many people would come, paying $40 with no prizes, but you just won't get as many people. It's just a fact.
Have you tried it? Or
I have not tried it. That's.
But I mean, certainly at the club level, you see like local clubs will have tournaments where the money doesn't really go towards prizes. They just try to keep the entry fee down,
right?
And they do tend to be pretty small tournaments,
right? And it's because there's a feedback too that people like going to a big event just because they see a lot of people playing chess, kind of giving you this positive feedback. That's why nationals, scholastics are so encouraging the kids. Wow, this room's full of 1,000 kids playing chess. So wow, I am part of, versus 10 people in a room. They can still be playing just as good at chess as if there's 1,000 people, but there's a feeling of that group. And I think that's some of the positive feedback, again, that the bigger events get.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Oh, and I'm sorry, Michael. I did think of one more question that I meant to ask you. I saw that with your prizes, you generally, there's two schools of thought. Some tournament directors just pay first place, second place, third place, but you're often doing based on the score that people play, a fixed prize amount.
Right.
So how did you come to the decision to take that approach?
Well, I read about it. It actually was in the 4th edition of the rule book, and some people on the US Chess forums mentioned it, and it intrigued me, and I did some modeling of how it would work. And the nice thing about it is it lets the players always, how much they get depends only on them. If they win 4 out of 5, they know what they're going to get, and not how many people tie with them. So from a player perspective, that's good. And from an organizer perspective, the average amount of money I pay out is proportional to the number of players in the section always. If you double the number of players, you will on average double the amount of money you pay out. So the prize fund naturally scales with the number of players. So that's both good for the players and the organizer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The disadvantage is I don't know in any given tournament what I'm going to pay out.
Right.
Sometimes perfect scores, which are rare, need to represent their rareness. They need to have a high amount of payout. But if everybody and all this, if a large number of the sections get perfect scores, then we actually can lose monies and have lost money on some tournaments. But it's on average, it's a pretty fair payout. And again, like with increment, the majority of the people seem to enjoy it, but some people tell me they don't like it. I think they just don't understand it. Mostly in the open section, which is hard to, actually the last tournament I didn't use score-based for the open section. It's hard because you can get a GM come in who's 300 points above everybody else, and them getting a perfect score is relatively easy, and hard for those other people to get good scores.
Right.
So it works well in under sections, not as well in the open. But it's overall, it's advantages. As soon as you finish, I can write a check. I don't have long lines of people waiting for the very last game, and then I have to write a million checks. So people finishing early get to go home early. They like that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Michael, I just want to thank you for your service to chess. I mean, it sounds like quite the labor of love, and I know that players who come across your tournament really appreciate it. And I'm in New Jersey, so I'm not too far away. So if I ever get back into it, I'm definitely gonna make an effort to make my way down to your area.
Okay, great.
So thanks so much for taking the time. And, players in the Eastern Seaboard listening, you can check out the Baltimore Open coming up and support the Washington International. Anything else for people you would recommend for people to do who would like to take some sort of action, Michael?
No, that would be great. Show up.
Okay.
Try it out.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And have a good day, Michael.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, as always, to my producer, Matthew Passy, for making Perpetual Chess happen. I also want to thank all you guys and girls who helped me grow Perpetual Chess. That includes everyone who tells a friend about the show, everyone who writes a positive review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, whatever other podcast platform you may be on. All of it is appreciated, and all of it keeps me going. But of course, most of all, I want to thank the people who provide financial support to the show. I would like to give extra special thanks to the following people and entities. They are Chessable Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, the Apprentice Chess Twitch channel, Andrew Bach, Austin Clough, Benjamin Porto, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, Dan O'Hanlon, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, I am Dimitri Schneider, Faraz Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Greg Natel, Greg Shahade, Guven Monet, Jens Green, John Jernigan, John Cromarty, John McCarthy, Kelly Palmer, Kevin O'Callahan, Lone Pine Chess, Lorraine Dore, Lucio Casada Silva, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Michael Kahn, FM Michael Oplin, Mike Zelazny, Moonmaster 9000, Peter Sodi, Reuven Fisher, Seattle Chess Club, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryant of Strong Chess, and Todd Kennedy. And I would also like to thank the following people and entities. They are Aaron Waffler, Ace Vallega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, FM Andre Terakov, Andrew Perry, Better Chess Training, Bill Juniper, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howard Lynn, Brian Mullis, Chad Hilton, Dr. Charles Snodgrass, Chris Flanagan, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Chris Lott, Christopher Wood. I am Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Courtney Fry, Daniel Gell, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Lucas of U.S. Chess Federation, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Cramley, CEO of Chessable.com, Dalen Shelton, Dwayne Edmonds, Ethan Smith. I am elect Donnie Ariel, the Fox Valley Chess Club of Aurora, Illinois, Dr. Frank Tortoris, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vandervelt, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Hans Schut, Harish Srinivasan, James Aspinwall, James Benastia, James Moore, Jason Anfang, Jason Woolham, J. Deep Chakrabarty, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, Jerry Wells, J.J. Stranad, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John Jeffrey, John McMurtry, Jordan Goodwin, Jose Rodriguez, Justin Gardner, Jen Shahade, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, GM Josh Friedel, I am Kare Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, I am Kostya Kovutsky, Krishna Kapala Krishnan, Larry Ryforth, Laura Belyovsky, Martin Knudsen, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, the Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Miguel Araspidi, Mike Clem, Mr. Mike Shahade, Nate Salon, Neil Bruce, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Passy Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Sweeney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Roy Yearwood, Ryan Berg, the Say Chess YouTube channel, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Sebastian Finsterwalder, WGM, Tatya Vabrahamian, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tom Edsel, Tomas Komarnich, Tony Rotella, Tyrin Price, Victor Vrankulj, Wayne Beam, William Brock, William Juniper, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, Zhivko Stoyanov, and that is everyone. Thanks, everyone. Catch you guys next week.